Welcome to Pherotone Studios. I'm going to go through with you how to wire push-pull pots, which will coil split a guitar with two humbuckers, and it'll have one tone, one volume, and a three-way switch. And I've drawn an amazing diagram for you, which I'm going to go through different colour wirings for different types of pickups, because Fender, Gibson, Seymour Duncan, and Chapman all use different coloured wires. So I'll go through those quickly. Which type of pots to use, and then we're going to have a listen to some sounds. Before I go through the wiring diagram, where there's two humbuckers, each of the humbucker splits individually. There's one tone pot, one volume pot, they're both push-pull, and there's a three-way switch. I'm just going to go through a few notes on the colour of cables you may find on your humbuckers and which type of pots and capacitors to buy. You need to buy a tone pot and a volume pot. I'd recommend a 500K logarithmic tone pot, which is often referred to as a type A pot. I'd ignore the type A and type B. They can sometimes be mixed up, so I'd be more inclined to go with logarithmic and linear. The reason I choose logarithmic is because if you use linear as a tone pot, I find that between like 0 and 1, it's like an on-off switch, and it sort of does borderline nothing from 1 to 10. If you use a logarithmic audio pot, that full sweep is usable. And for the volume pot, I'd go linear. Well, for the volume pot, if I'm being honest, I'd go logarithmic or linear. To my ears, it doesn't make too much of a difference. And I ride the volume pot a lot, but it doesn't seem to bother me which way round that is. But for the tone pot, it really bothers me. So, whatever you feel for the volume pot. For push-pull coil splits, I would use 500K pots. Reason being, if you're using, you'd use 250K pots for single coils, and the reason for that is otherwise they're too bright. For humbuckers, I'd go 500K pots. If you're using 250K pots with humbuckers, they can be far too dark, and it's hard to bring out some of that brightness. So it's easy to use 500K pots for this mod or this wiring, because with the single coils, at least you can roll the tone down a bit if it's too bright. Again, you can use different value capacitors, but I would use a 0.022 capacitor for this. Anything with humbuckers basically, because it's fine having it too bright on one setting. You can always turn brightness down, but if that brightness isn't there, it's hard to bring it out sometimes. So it's better to have it too bright. Although, if I'm being honest, this does not sound too bright to my ears. And I've just got some notes there on the different colour wirings for Fender, Gibson, Seymour Duncan and Chapman. Chapman actually did throw me off because I had to work it out. So I'll put a link to a video from Guns and Guitars which helps you work out which way round the wires are if it doesn't match any of these. Quite often two of the leads will be joined together, so in that blue box on the screen you can see which leads are more often joined together. Right, onto the wiring diagram. I'm using Fender wiring for this because it's got one tone, one volume, a three-way switch, so it's kind of the most common wiring you'd find on a double humbucker Fender, although I know on the Fender Player Series they only have one pot that push-pulls. So this isn't quite like a Fender. I've used Fender colours for the wiring because we had to use some kind of colour, so I just went with that. Just going to quickly go through a few of these bits. So the hot cable from the bridge and the hot cable from the neck, they both need to go to opposite ends of that three-way switch. So if you look at that, it's the green wire that sort of loops around and goes all the way to the three-way switch. And then what I'd do is I'd finish the three-way switch and I'd do those interconnecting bits, so where it goes between sort of the end top right lugs and the bottom left lugs and the diagonal bit, and I'd run a cable all the way back to the main lug of the tone pot. I'd solder all the switch up, and then I'd look at the volume knob next. So we've tucked in one of the cables from the three-way switch to one of the end lugs on the volume pot. Before you solder that, put another cable in there, and you want to run that to the end lug of the tone pot. Don't solder that. Well, you can solder it, it's up to you. But once those two wires are in that volume pot lug, bosh some solder in there, job done. The other end lug on the volume pot, bend that around until it touches the back of the pot. You can't always do this with a push-pull pot. It's not always possible, so you have to run a cable from there to the back of the pot. The bit where you earth it on the push-pull pot is like a tab that sticks out, so just run a cable to there. Don't solder that yet because you've got to run about 400 more cables to that point. What I would do now is take the earth from the bridge of the guitar, so that'll be just a random cable sticking out sort of towards where the bridge is in that cavity, and I would take the earth wires, so the ground, sorry, from the neck pickup, and the south start wire. For Fender that's red, and I've put that all on the back of the pickup. Have one more cable ready to go from there, which will go to one of the lugs on the push-pull extra tabs, and just solder all that to the back of the volume pot. So there are 5 wires in total. There's the ground from the neck pickup, the end of the south wire, there's the one from the lug of the volume pot, the one from the bridge, and there's a spare wire which you're going to put in one of the lugs on the push-pull on that volume pot. So as per the diagram, look at the extra lugs for the push-pull pot for the volume, and the one that's going to the back of the pot, so which is grounded, I would put that in that first lug as per that diagram. Once that's soldered, go to the next one along, and that's where you've got the 2 cables, so the north and south ends. For Fender wiring, those are black and white. Use my previous slide, which goes through the colours for different pickups, or you may have to work it out to work out which 2 cables go in there and solder that in. One last thing to do with the volume pot, take a wire from the tip of that jack socket and run it to the middle lug of the volume pot. Job done. Hopefully that jack's already wired up. You may as well work out which one is the one from the sleeve, and you can run that to the back of the tone pot, and that is literally all you need to do with the volume pot. To be honest, I would fit that to the body at this point, just so you can't run cables too short for whatever reason. Tone pot wires, what I would do now is I would get your capacitor and I'd bend that in a way where it can fit in the middle lug of the tone pot, and so one of the legs is sticking over the top where all that earth tab is, because you're going to run a few mil cables to the top of that. So find a way of holding that capacitor in place, and I would solder the capacitor in the middle lug of that tone pot just to hold it in place. Job done. If you haven't done so already, there's a cable going from one of the lugs of the volume pot, and that should go to one of the lugs of the tone pot as per the diagram. It's sort of in the middle at the top. I'd solder that in place, and you don't have to do anything more on the big lugs of the push-pull pot there. Oh, sorry, of the pot. We're going to get onto the push-pull bit at the moment. For the extra tabs of the tone push-pull pot, the first one I would run is from the ground of that push-pull pot. So from that tab to one of the lugs as per the diagram. And then one of those middle extra tabs, there should be 2 wires, like in this diagram, there's 2 on the far left, so the black and white one. So these are your north and south ends. This is black and white for Fender wiring. I don't know what colour it would be for your pickups. And I would solder those to that lug now. We want to take the wire from the sleeve, so the ground of the jack socket, that goes to the top of the push-pull tone pot. Also, I would take, that's where the capacitor leg is, and there's that cable coming from the tab of the extra tabs on the push-pull little bit. You take the ground and the south start cable from the bridge pickup and solder that all to, I'm going to say, the back of the tone pot, which is sort of the top of the push-pull area. And that's pretty much it. So it's hard to explain, but once you start doing it, it's not actually too bad. It doesn't take too long. Yeah, it works nicely. Welcome back. I'm just going to go through the sounds of this guitar. I can make now it's got the proper wiring. So both humbuckers split. The knob nearest the headstock splits the neck humbucker, and the one nearest the bridge splits the bridge humbucker. Easy to remember. So this is the neck humbucker. And this is the neck humbucker split, so it's a bit like a single coil. It's brilliant. Right, do the same with the bridge. So this is the bridge humbucker. Now split. And middle position. This is nothing split. Now with both split. That's cool. May as well do the odd ones. So front neck pickup split, bridge pickup as a humbucker. Now the other way around, neck humbucker, bridge split. Brilliant, and just for reference, here's the tone knob. This is a logarithmic tone knob, 500k, with a 0.022 capacitor. So you get full use of the tone on the full suite. And I may as well do the volume, so. Beautiful. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out some other videos. You might like them.